different elements of sourcing. You can use different pieces of outside evidence. The next thing that I want to do is look at an SAQ. And so this one is an image SAQ, and it's related to Andrew Jackson. And you may remember from your study of Andrew Jackson that he was involved in a lot of things prior to becoming president. He was in the War of 1812. He was an Indian fighter, and then and founder of the Democratic Party. Once he was king, he uses a lot of, once he was president, he uses a lot of vetoes. He also is going to be involved in a number of big issues that you want to make sure that you're looking at in your studies. All right, so we've got the image. Then we want to look at the questions. Briefly describe one perspective about politics in the 1830s expressed in the image. All right, so perspective, isn't that another word for point of view? About politics in the 1830s expressed in the image. Briefly explain a specific event or development that led to. So wouldn't this be a cause? And then briefly explain one specific effect. So that's a causation question. So we need to think back. All right, so we want to talk about point of view. From whose point of view is this? Well, if we're looking at Andrew Jackson and it says King Andrew the First, they're trying to show that he is acting like a monarch. And is that something that people in the United States would like? Probably not. And then born to command, he's got the veto and he's destroying the Constitution, internal improvements, U.S. Bank, and judiciary of the United States, all just torn up. So if we're looking at this, we need to think about from whose point of view would this be? It would be someone who doesn't like Andrew Jackson. Who doesn't like Andrew Jackson at this time? It would be the Democrats. So the Whigs. The Whigs don't like Andrew Jackson because he's a Democrat. So I'm going to say, all right, so this is taken from the perspective of a Whig. I also want you to notice the way that the question is worded. It says, describe a perspective about politics expressed in the image. When you're answering an SAQ related to a political cartoon or an image, and they're talking about this, when you go back and look at your answer, if you've never referenced the image or something in it, you've not really answered the question. So you've got to make sure that you plug that in there. Same thing with your example. How is your example of a cause that led people to think that he's acting inappropriately here? How would this be expressed in the image? Same thing here with the effect. All right, so let's look at a sample that I made up these answers. So yours could be totally different, and that's okay. I just want you to see the format. All right, so if we look at question one, this is where we were asked about the point of view or the perspective that's shown in the image. So I'm going to answer the question first. Then I'm going to identify how it's shown in the image. A political perspective from the 1830s expressed in the image would be that of a Whig. So there's my answer. I need to define what the Whigs are and why they would disagree with this. The Whig Party formed during the period in opposition to Jackson's Democratic Party and his kingly actions. So I'm kind of making reference there to the image that restricted federal legislative and judicial power. All right, so there's my definition. This is my answer to the question and my definition of what a Whig is. This view is shown in the image by, so now I'm going to tie it back to the image, by the depiction of Jackson acting like a monarch through his many vetoes of federal programs and destruction of the Constitution. So that would earn a point because I've answered the question and I've tied it back to the image. So now we want an example that is going to connect the cause that led to the perspective. So look what I've got here. One event that led to this perspective was the bank war. There's my answer. I can't just stop there. I've got to define what was the bank war. So this may be something that you talked about in class. Jackson vetoed the legislature's recharter of the Bank of the United States. That's going to be his big, squabble with Henry Clay in the bank. Additionally, Jackson then later removed the money from the existing Bank of the United States and redistributed the money to his pet state banks. So this is my answer to the question, the bank war, and then I've defined it. Now I've got to tie it back to the image. Jackson's tampering with the national banking system was viewed by the Whigs as an abuse of presidential power and is shown in the image by King Andrew stepping on the torn up U.S. Bank. And then an effect of this, okay? So an effect of Jackson acting in this way, we would say One effect of the political development shown in the image is the Trail of Tears. The image, and now I've got to tie it back and prove this. The image shows King Andrew stepping on a torn up judiciary of the United States. This could be referencing Jackson ignoring John Marshall's Supreme Court ruling in Worcester versus Georgia that would have protected Cherokee Native lands from being taken by the state. Instead, Jackson refused to enforce the ruling, and a few years later, the Cherokee Natives were removed in the Trail of Tears. By Jackson not following the ruling, he weakened the authority of the judiciary as shown by his stepping on the image. So I am tying it back to the image. All right, so I hope that that helps with looking at some of those sample answers. So let's come back together, and we've got just a couple of more minutes left together, and I want to just very briefly come back in and look at a few of the multiple choice questions that fit with this time period. And we're going to go through them kind of quickly. So you may need to kind of pause this or maybe come back and look at those multiple choice questions. And these multiple choice questions are dealing with that rise of the conflict over slave